Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now, you never know it'll get you to do a video, but I was watching this video from Brien yesterday, I believe it was, and he was in the tombs of the nobles at Aswan and just doing a little tour of the tombs. And he came in one area here and he showed this and said it was a false door, and then went on with his tour. And I just kind of slapped myself in the head, and I remembered a video I started working on about 2 weeks ago. But this symbol up here is a very important one. And I read a couple websites and I really didn't get down to the answer I was looking for, but this is really a combination of two hieroglyphs. And if I never would have started looking into hieroglyphs about 2 years ago, and I'm only up to maybe a 5th grade level, super hard, over 1,000 different variations of glyphs, but it's the best thing I've ever done as far as understanding how the Egyptians conveyed ideas and concepts. Definitely the best thing I ever done, and if I never would have started looking into hieroglyphs, I wouldn't have nearly the knowledge or the understanding of ancient Egypt that I do today. These false doors are common. They go back all the way to the Old Kingdom and really the earliest parts of the history we call dynastic Egypt. As the name would suggest, a false door is an imitation door usually found in mortuary temples and tombs across ancient Egypt. Facing west, these doors served as an imaginary passage between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and were believed to allow the ka, an element of the soul, to pass through them. And here's that door I just showed. But why is this the symbol? They really don't go into it in this article, and it's clear to me only because I have studied hieroglyphs for the last 2 years. And I went to Ancient Egypt Online to see if they had the true origin of this symbol and what it really meant and how they got it, but they did not. Now here is another false door, and if I would not have studied hieroglyphs, I wouldn't have a clue of how this symbol came to be. But it's really the mixture of two hieroglyphs, and I'll explain that in a second here. But you can see here, there's Anubis right there, and there is the symbol for the pyramid, or a pylon is what they call it. And can we directly connect Anubis and the pyramids through this symbol? Well, here is Anubis, and here is the pyramid symbol right here on this false door, but we can connect it in a much more precise way than that. The false door symbol is really a combination of two hieroglyphs. Up here, this is how they represent the sky hieroglyph in this false door. Now here is their standard hieroglyph for door or gate. That's pretty easy to understand. Now here is the hieroglyph for sky, and that is kind of self-explanatory if you just think of the symbolism. Now this symbol can be used as an ideogram or have biliteral interpretations, which means they can be used with other things in a combination of meanings. So we have the symbol for gate down here, and oftentimes in tombs they have the life story of the person written on here. And then we have the symbol for sky up above, and it usually has niches on the side, so it comes down to represent the sky symbol. And sometimes it has emanations on this, and I'm going to go into that a little more on a video I have coming up on the Great Pyramid. So the combination of the gate symbol and the sky symbol, which also represents heaven, this is the gates to the sky or the heaven, and that was certainly the place of the Egyptian afterlife, Orion, and it says that in their text. Now, can we attach the gates of heaven to this monument we call the Sphinx today here? Well, let's just do a little review from my last video. Now, a few of you got confused when I said Anubis is clearly stated as the guardian of the necropolis, and you said, hey, wait a minute, the pyramids are not tombs. Well, here is the Giza necropolis, and I think we have always had kings buried out in front of here. This has always been a necropolis, in my opinion. I think even the early kings of unrecorded history only recorded on things like the Turin's Kings List that go way back into antiquity. I think they were always buried out here. So guardian of the sacred necropolis and guardian of the underworld, especially with these passages going right down, right behind them, it's clear what this monument was. It's exactly what the ancient Egyptians tell us it was. And people say, it couldn't be Anubis. It's clear the Sphinx was carved thousands of years before the Egyptians came along. Well, do you believe Zahi Hawass that this all started 5,000 years ago? Well, I certainly don't. We have kings lists that go way back into antiquity. So if they identify this temple in their ancient history, why do we ignore that? I have no idea. People have said, well, the Anubis head, the stone would have never fit. It would have been out of proportion and they couldn't have found a chunk of the original mound here to make the head out of. Well, let me just ask you this. And maybe people didn't hear that little clip I used down at Luxor, but if we wanted to mount a head on a stone monument, what would we do today? Well, the first thing we would do is make a base in the top of the neck to mount the head on, and that's exactly what the ancient Egyptians did. The head could have been made of anything. This body was painted black way back in antiquity. They could have put anything on top here as a head and painted it black. They built the Great Pyramid, so the head issue, I don't really worry about that too much. I just listen to what the history and what they tell us. This was always a sacred necropolis. The afterlife was always the preeminent thing on these people's minds and in their art and in really their everyday life. He was guardian of the sacred necropolis. That's what it says about Anubis. The gates of heaven, does that match up perfectly? On the box coffin of Orion, that's what it says in the ancient text. But also, there is something very special about that symbol for the gates of heaven in Anubis. And can we connect it to the pyramids? Well, we can directly connect it to the pyramids. It says those false doors are a portal between the living world and the spiritual world. And it says Anubis is the guide between the living world and the spiritual world. Right at the head of the necropolis, at the entrance to the cemetery. Come on, couldn't that make more sense? Nothing from the Egyptians say a lion was aligned to Leo in 10,500 BC. Anubis faces the rising sun. On March 21st, the day of equal light and darkness, the day of equal good and evil. Here he is, the most famous art scene in all of Egypt, the perfect balance between good and evil. And here's a little Sphinx there telling you what that's all about. The Pyramidion from Egypt. There was a bunch of these found. Each side means something specifically, and I went over that in my Finding Atlantis through the Sphinx and Great Pyramid video that people wanted me to make. But here is Anubis on top, sky, gates of heaven. Anubis is upon the gates of heaven. Pyramidion, Anubis leading the show here. There is that symbol, the gates of heaven, or gates of the sky, heaven, sky, same thing. Who is upon that? Anubis. He is upon the gates of heaven. From Tut's tomb, Anubis upon the gates of the sky or gates of heaven. Here, sometimes it's a double gateway. Anubis upon the gates of the sky or heaven. You're not going to find a lion on this most sacred object of Egypt. Why is that? Because Anubis was clearly the great shrine of Giza, originally called Rostau. They name the Temple of Anubis in the sacred text. Only Anubis would be allowed to be guarding the sacred necropolis. Here's another representation, Anubis. Here is the sky glyph on top of the gate glyph, the gates of heaven, the emanations, and I will go into that in a future video here, coming up in the next few weeks. But it's clear Anubis guarded the gates of heaven, and isn't that perfect with the pyramids being depicted as the belt stars of Orion? Even the Sumerians say Orion was the light of heaven, and that was certainly the place that the soul went to from the Egyptian text, heaven as we call it. And through everything I know from hieroglyphs and other symbolism coming from Egypt, how do the Egyptians relate a god or a certain story to a physical place? Well, they just mount that symbolism onto that symbol. He's guarding the gates of heaven, mounted on the symbol, the very precise way Egyptians tell us what the deal is. So they're trying to tell us that Anubis guarded the gates of heaven, and it's directly associated with the pyramids, the place that represented the afterlife and Orion. They named the temple in the ancient text. The legs and body matches perfectly. They tell us the story. in the symbolism that it's directly connected with the pyramids, that Anubis guarded the gates of heaven, guarded the sacred necropolis, the underworld. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Hope you thought this was cool, and you all have a very nice day.